if you were at the NG Poland this year, or actually also in NG Rome this year, you might have seen some of these slides already. I'm going to go over the main things that I wanted to present, but I'm also going to veer off a little bit to give a larger overview of SignalStore and how we see it today. Also, I'm fully aware that Mateusz did a very nice presentation at the last meetup. He covered a lot of things already, which is awesome. I'll try to go just a little bit back a bit and just to go into fundamentals first, and then we can expand on that. So that's basically the plan of this presentation. All right, so although it's titled Custom Features of NgRx SignalStore, again, I'm going to go a bit broader with the overviews of things. All right, so let's see. So what do we have here? We actually are fully aware that we have, global store, we just mentioned, right? And we had the component store as well. That is our local state management solution. And we were pretty happy how things are turning out, right? They were working together well. But then, signals are around the corner. That was last year. Actually, we knew about the signals almost 2 years ago, maybe even more. We've been talking to Angular team fairly frequently. We saw how Pavel and Alex were pushing Angular into this new reactive primitive world. So, and we've been in conversations with them how it can affect NgRx as well. But anyhow, signals were there. What do we do? Well, we do a lot of things. But first, again, I was already introduced. I'm currently the front-end lead at Snowflake, part of the NgRx team for a while, Angular GDE, and I'm active around the Angular and JavaScript events around Toronto area. That's me with this aside. Signals were around, and what do we do? Well, if you're already using Global Store or using ComponentStore for local state management, you don't have to fear a lot because we created an APIs that will return you signals instead of observables. For example, store select signal with exact same selector as you've been using before will return you a signal back, right? Store select gives you observable, store select signal gives you signal. So if you're very eager to make your application like signal-based, very easy change for you. And then instead of, async pipe in the templates, now you can just call signals as they are. Very simple change. Same for ComponentStore. Not a ton of things you have to do so your existing solutions would still work with a signal world. And this is one of the principles of the NgRx teams as well, right? To keep upgrading and maintaining NgRx as the new things from Angular are introduced. And we're very proud of us being able to keep up with all of these things. It's one of the principles how we operate as a team. So you might say, okay, so signal problem is solved, right? Why do we need this new thing called SignalStore? Why do we need it? Why do we need it? Well, the answers are interesting. We know that Angular has been evolving as a framework, and TypeScript also been evolved, right? And as TypeScript or Angular introduce new features, we try to make NgRx more powerful, more stricter typing, more auto-generated things, and things of that nature. But one of the bigger limitations, it's not even limitations, it's just the way we're injecting things into components, classes, whatever else, services, is through class constructor. Right? So the only way we can get things injected into a thing was always through class. That's why For example, our global store is class-based, right? Our component store is also class-based because we need to inject things into the class. Now, there was an evolution, and inject function became available within Angular. And then that means you can all you care about, you don't need classes anymore. All you care is to execute that within the injectable context of component or anything else. And that opened the whole door of possibilities. So let's just first look at some of the limitations of some class-based approaches. One of them is typing, right? Again, it's not very possible to create a dynamic class and have properties and methods that are strongly typed. What do I mean by that? I mean, obviously, you can add things to the class dynamically, but it won't be reflected in that instance type, for example, at least not very easily to do that. The other one is tree shaking. I'd say this one's, it's somewhat interesting, but the idea behind this, if you have properties and methods that are within the class and all of a sudden you stop using them anywhere, they still are part of the bundle, because anything part of the class, won't be tree shaken, right? If you use the class itself. Is it a big thing? It could be, but I'd say in our enterprise application, that's a minor thing, but it's still one of the things. But one of the biggest ones for me is extensibility. And the extensibility is that this is actually where it's huge. So again, multiple inheritance is not supported in classes. And it's not very easy to extend the class as well. I mean, you can inherit again, but again, this introduces more problems than solutions. And extensibility is actually the reason why SignalStore came to be. Because, introducing a whole new state management library, a third one, in fact, right, should not be taken lightly. And we already saw that just signals alone is not really the reason why SignalStore came to be, because our existing APIs for the two previous solutions were adjusted to support signals. And this thing actually changes everything. That's how I feel it. But let's first take a look how we would actually create SignalStore. And again, some of you may be already familiar, but bear with me. I'm going to go over this quickly. So say we have some kind of state that we want to maintain, like book state, right? So we have some array of books. And book is, again, an object that has some ID, title, price, stuff like that. This is very much a toy example, but I just want to show you what the SignalStore consists of. So how do we create a SignalStore? Well, we call a SignalStore function, right? So we call that function, and that function takes a bunch of things in it. One of the things that it can take as an argument is withState function. So you can see it takes functions inside as well. And with withState, what it does is it will create a book's signal inside of it. It's a little bit more than that, but again, for this example, let's just think of it that we will have a book's signal as a result of this one. But this is the state that the SignalStore will maintain, again, books. Now, a lot of times, if you've been using NgRx already, you have a selectors, right? Selectors are what are they doing? They are creating derived state. So based on some kind of state that we have under the new, we actually create a derived state based on that state. In this case, if we want to compute like free books, right, we will use new Angular's computed, and we get the books already with the state, and we can just filter them, for by price equals 0. And this will get us computed value of free books. And we can now use it also once we inject SignalStore. So these are automatically recalculated, right? You don't have to do it. It's kind of packaged within your SignalStore. So now we have the state itself, the derived state. Next thing we need is also how we operate on the state. Again, we're trying to keep things encapsulated, so anything that affects the state should be within the SignalStore as well. And that means methods. Methods, for example, in this case, I have a method to add a book, right? So if I want to add a book, I can patch the state and update my new book's value in immutable way, right? So I need to spread the previous one and append the book at the end. This method now becomes part of the SignalStore as well. Now, there's one more thing that's it's a fundamental part of state management is our lifecycle hooks. So for example, what do we do when this SignalStore initializes or being destroyed? In this case, we have with hooks, right? And we can call on init or on destroy. And we want when this SignalStore would be initialized, instantiated, or destroyed together with the lifecycle of a component. All right. So how do we use this? How do we use the SignalStore? Well, there are multiple ways to use the SignalStore. In this case, this SignalStore is not meant to be a singleton. Right? I'll repeat, this one's not meant to be a singleton in this case, because we want to tie it to a life cycle of a particular component. In this case, we will specify in the providers, you can see there the bookstore right there. So what does it mean? It means that before this component is created, the SignalStore will not exist at all. Once this component is created, right, then the SignalStore would be initialized and it will be later injected as we do here. So this is, this is the books. Good. So now, let me see. There you go. Oh, I didn't update the slide. All right. The idea still is like if we want to add the book, we can add the book. I had to do this before. And then we can read the book's signal as it is, and free books. Remember that computed one is also there. This slide needs to be updated. Yeah, but the idea is still the same. So this is how you would use this. You can also use the SignalStore as a singleton. You can provide that configuration as part of the first argument, saying provided in root, and that way it'll be basically a singleton, just like your other services that provided in root or other injectables with provided in root. When you don't provide it as a root, when you provide it as a lifecycle of a component, it will be attached to the lifecycle of the component, means it will be also destroyed when the component is destroyed. So it'll auto clean up itself. But anyhow, as you saw, we have 4 building blocks of this state management, right? So we have with state, with computed, with methods, and with hooks, right? Those are major building blocks. And what's interesting that the return type of all of these functions is actually a SignalStoreFeature. Why is it interesting? The reason why it's interesting is that the SignalStore itself actually doesn't care what you provide to it. All it takes is just a multiple SignalStore features, right? So you can provide as many of them as you want. You can provide even multiple with states if you want, right? They'll basically fold one to each other. So each next one will be aware of the previous one as well, right? So that is basically the flow. And this is, again, this is very, very powerful, that the SignalStore itself does not care what with state, what each individual function does. What it does at the end, again, it basically collects the array of them, right? All of them. Now, what that means is we can provide further extensibility to this. And for that, we have a special function called SignalStoreFeature. That function also can take a number of SignalStore features, right? And then it packages them into one specific SignalStore feature, right? So it can take a whole array of them, and at the end it packages them in one. You can think of it as basically does the reduce on that array and calls one to each other, right? So it's also a very simple function. In fact, it doesn't really care what each of the SignalStore feature do, but it just packages them together into one single one. And with this, now we can provide what we call those custom features. Let's take a look again. Very primitive example: loading state. As part of the any applications, you would have a loading state over the API, right? Although again, there's new resource API and other things. We're not gonna touch on this right now, but if you're manually calling like HTTP client, you're kind of manually also managing its loading state. Let's see an example of what we can do with this one. And by the way, if you have questions, you can always ask them in the chat, and we'll get to them as well. But anyhow, think of the loading state. So we have a request status that could be idle, pending, fulfilled, or it could be an error, right? That's the request status of any API with the word get, put, whatever. Now we will package this state, right, in a single property, request status property. Let's create a special custom feature for it. So we'll create a function called withRequestStatus, and it will return a SignalStoreFeature, right? And remember, this is a special function that can take multiple store features and kind of package them together. What can we put there? Well, first we'll do the with state, and we'll provide the initial state, for example, with idle. Now we'll create with computed, and we'll create a few things there. Things like is pending, right, when the request status is pending, is fulfilled when the request status is equal to fulfilled, and error as well, right? It'll be computed. If it's an object, we'll kind of extract that error string outside of it. So we are packaging with state and with computed together in a single feature, and this feature will be with request status. This will be our custom feature. How will we use it? Well, remember the SignalStore feature returns you this store feature, right? And that means we can just use it in place in our existing SignalStore. Because again, once again, SignalStore does not care what you exactly provide to it as long as it adheres to that interface. And just like that, with a simple function call, with a simple feature like this, all of a sudden we have a request status itself, right? It's a signal of request status. And we have other computed things like, is it pending? Is it fulfilled? Is it error? See how powerful that is? And what's interesting is you can add now this custom feature anywhere in your SignalStore, and it will automatically add that state and this computed property. So you can really reuse it in any of the SignalStores that you create within your application. All right. So then you can basically continue to inject your, for example, book service in this case, and do the patch state. First to set pending, right? That set pending will also, this will be a special functions we call custom updaters, right? So that set pending will set the request status to pending, and set fulfill will set it to fulfilled, obviously. And again, just like that, it's a lot less code to type, and you basically have the reusable functionality of this API state. All right, let's see a more complicated feature, right? A more complex one. For example, entities. Again, if you're not using entities, you should be using entities. It's a much better way to manage collections. We typically keep collections as an array, and that's fine if you consume it as an array and you never change the array by itself, right? You don't never delete one or remove one or update one of the items in the array. You can just have it as an array. That's fine. However, if you are manipulating that collection it's much easier to do it through entities. It's also a more performant way to do it through entities, because whenever you're updating a single book, for example, in our book collection, or removing one book in book collection, it takes an O of 1 time complexity, right? So it's instant, right? It's because of a special structure that entity state provides. With that in mind, we want to utilize this with entity. And for example, now instead of an array, we can do with entities, and let's say, hey, you'll be working with book. And all of a sudden, it creates it creates a specific structure that allows you to operate on this. So for example, when we need to add a book, all we have to do is to say, hey, patch the state and add entity of a book, and it will automatically add to that entity. Removing the book, or even, for example, updating all entities at once, make all of the books free, right? We can custom patch that. Again, super useful. It removes all the error-prone operations involving manipulating an array that we need to keep immutable, right? It helps a ton with all of these things. And this with entities is actually part of the NgRx signals package as well. I think it's NgRx signals/entities or entity. Cool. All right. So this is some of the thing. This is actually the one that comes out of box, provided by NgRx itself. But again, there's tons of other ideas floating around, right? You can have with the router state, or you can have with local storage sync, right? Automatically syncing your state to local storage. With forms was floating around as well, right? And we can easily do these things and wrap these things within the SignalStore. It's very, very powerful. Mateusz last time showed some of his examples within his code base. Has he been taking this custom functionalities, and whether you reuse them across your code base, or even just extracting out of a single SignalStore, that's fine. It's a very valid use case, either or. All right, and then again, there's a lot of the community projects already that are adding these custom features. For example, Manfred was here last time as well, and a team, Reiner as well, Mike. They've been creating, working on something like NgRx Toolkit with their own take on the custom features, right? So they've been adding some things. Again, these are not official NgRx team provided things. These are community custom things that folks are adding. Like Reduct DevTools, or with data service, right? They're wrapping the entire service already, including more functionality into their custom features. So I'd recommend to take a look at them. The other one that is very visible on our radar is NgRx Traits Signals by Gabriel Guerrero, and this one is helping work with the data, with the table data that's already on the client side loaded, right? So the entire data you have on the client side, now you want to add some pagination, sorting, filtering, again, selection of entities and things like that. He created a whole bunch of things, and I think he continues to add more and more features there. Again, another one interesting to take a look at. And these ones are becoming more interesting, and people want to share their custom features. So with that in mind, what we're working on right now is also adding a page at the NgRx IO where people can share their custom feature plugins that they want to share with the rest of the people, right? They won't be part of the NgRx signals package, but you can always like npm install them from their own npm repositories, right? So that will be, again, one of the things that can help you pick one that's already created, or maybe even take a look at it and get inspired to create your own. Maybe somebody solved in some way already the problem that you're trying to solve. All right. So again, just a quick summary on this. all NgRx state management solutions are signal ready, right? So if you have the previous ones, again, you don't have to migrate off. They're all maintained. All three of them are maintained. We're not deprecated one in favor of the other, right? We keep maintaining them. But what we do this, we still recommend start with a SignalStore, especially if you're if you're keeping up with Angular versions. So the latest SignalStore is highly extensible. And again, its extensibility is the primary reason why it exists to begin with, right? And the latest Angular innovations allowed us to actually create this, which is, again, by the way, I'd want to do a special call out here. Marco was the lead for a lot of the SignalStore development. Been working over a year on that before it was published last year. Almost exactly last year, before in Poland it was published. And within a year, right now, it reached almost 120,000 downloads. And in the state management world of Angular, it now became the third most popular or most downloaded state management solution, after, of course, our trusted global store and ComponentStore, right? But it says a very high rise there, and we expect it to eventually take the second spot as well. All right. And finally, again, there are community created solutions, and we plan to have a page so you can take a look at some of them. And they're not just scattered, so we can assemble them in one place so you can see what people are working, what people are contributing. All right. With that, again, many thanks to our trusted team members within NgRx, Brandon Roberts and Tim DeSchreiber, with a huge maintenance of the NgRx over the years. Again, specifically want to call out Marco, who has been incredible addition to our team now what, 3-4 years back, probably 3 years back or something. And again, his incredible efforts on working on this NgRx signal package, including the SignalStore. And one more call out is for Rainer, who became our trusted collaborator earlier, sometime mid this year. It's been phenomenal in within our team, helping team, going over the issues, proposing new changes. Again, very much hands-on and very phenomenal guy. So we're very happy that he's helping us as well. With that in mind, also, again, this is where you can find us. We are on Twitter, well, now X, LinkedIn. We have a Discord as well. Our docs is NgRx.io, a blog, workshops. By the way, we do workshops every so often. We plan to restart the workshops for Europe in January and for US in February. So keep an eye on that. We'll be posting them either at the NgRx.io/workshops or workshops where the Tito/NgRx, they'll be also there. And of course, NgRx is open source, so you can always find things at the GitHub repo. This is where I have issues, discussions. There's a number of RFCs open now. Join the conversations, provide your inputs. They all help shape the future of NgRx. With that, again, thank you, and I'll be very happy to answer any other questions that you might have. I don't know if we have questions immediately after my presentation or later on, but
yeah. So thank you, Alex, first of all, for your great presentation. And yeah, now it's time to dive into the Q&A session dedicated to your talk. So we already have a couple of them. Some of them were already answered or partially answered by other folks on the chat, but would be also great to hear from you. So let's get this one as a starting point. So how can I properly use SignalStore with route cards to listen to route events and evoke its methods? I also tried injecting it into the ng module, but it seems like SignalStore works only for components.
Yeah, the router story is still something that we're working on. It's true that component is the primary use case for a lot of these things. I think we even have an issues open on this one. So I probably won't have any more information for this right now, but let me see. I have actually issues open right now as well. Yeah, but yes, and I see some. Um, I think it'll be great to have this conversation within the issues. It's a very valid question, so thank you for the question. And sorry, I cannot just give you the answer right now for this one.
Right. No worries. And then the other one, should one use withEntities in combination with state?
Good question. So entities adds you can use it, and again, you can have even multiple with the states. Remember, the signal store doesn't really care what you're providing. It just, hey, if you provide another with state, it'll create another signal for it. It's actually deep signal it'll create as well, which means any of its property also can be signals. But anyhow, the main idea is that you can add as many as you want if you want to, or you can package in different features. Remember how we just right now had one feature that adds its own with state, and then entities has also with state inside of it. That's all fine. With entities, we'll create your entity collection, right? But if you want to add anything else to that entity collection beside of it, sure, that's fine. You can use it. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if I would recommend to have a separate signal store for each entity. And again, frequently or sometimes, sometimes these ones will live in the global scope, which be for root, right? You can just create a number of them for each signal store for its own entity. And that way they're kind of separated, and each one maintains and 100% owns that state and everything that you can derive off that state, and also all the methods to operate on that state, right? So this way your signal store just doesn't grow out of control. Yeah, so that will be my recommendation. You can have a multiple of signal stores like that.
Nice. Okay, and the next one, I believe this one is being asked a lot. I've heard it multiple times already. So maybe about the dev tool, like for the global store, if there is something similar for the Signal store.
Yes, very good question. And again, I've had this question many times as well, and my answer becomes more and more confident as I go. So first of all, I showed that Manfred had I think it's like with the DevTools as part of his NgRx toolkit. That will, I think, try to connect to the DevTools some of the things. However, the reason why we were not adding anything specific for SignalStore like DevTool like that, it's because Angular DevTools we were hoping that they will be help you to see what's happening within signals, so you don't need to have anything specific for NgRx for this. And now we are more and more confident that that's going to happen in the very not too far future. Just not to spoil anything else, I think. We talked to the Angular team about this. There's something in the works to actually see signal states in general. So we assume that SignalStore will can probably naturally fall into that, and we don't need to have a special DevTools for this as well. However, there's another thing. I kind of touched it at the beginning. There's a new RFC to add event-based changes also to SignalStore. And when I say event-based, you might think of like Redux kind of based as well. So you can still use SignalStore as it is, but you would have an option to also have some global events happening. And for that, we might add some DevTools support, but they'll be in the Redux DevTools, the ones that you're already probably using with Global Store. All of that is still in the RFC mode, but there's I think it's a bright future for that as well.
Right. Okay, so there is another one about how would you handle data relationship in the store?
Oh, how would you handle data relationship in store? That's a very open question. I had a talk about ComponentStore some time ago, and I called it the use cases of ComponentStore. I think that was 2 years ago at NgRx. And I was talking about 4 use cases for ComponentStore. The same 4 use cases apply for SignalStore and as well, except for one of the use cases when I was saying the global state was not quite recommended for ComponentStore. For SignalStore, it's fine. So the main idea is you could have stores at different levels, right? Like basically two separate things. One is the globally injected SignalStore, right? Or again, your global inject store is also globally injected. Think of that as one type of globally injected data. And then you have a locally injected data. It means it's not singleton, and it's injected at component at specific level. Now, for the global data, right, that data should be a source of truth for a specific thing. For example, books, right? It has no idea how books are used, but it keeps that state of a books. It solely owns this. It talks to the services that persist this data to the backend, or retrieve the data from the backend, or even local storage or whatever else you want to do. It basically owns that 100%, and all the methods that operate on that state are part of that store, right? It has no idea about the rest of the business logic of your components. And then you'll have components that could be injected at different levels. If you think of the node, again, the tree of components, think of one of them as like a node, and it has some data as well, local data, and it can also inject books from the global SignalStore as well, right? So that component will be managing, that SignalStore will be managing specific components state, right? And we call that local state. So the SignalStore is used as a local state for that component. That's another use case, again, very popular. And the third one that I'll just mention quickly right now is one in the middle. For example, it would be some SignalStore that's injected at some branch of this component tree. The idea is once you inject something in the branch and one of the components within the branch that has further children out, that store it's provided by that component, so it's tied to the life cycle of that component. But also it could be injected anywhere in the children where they need some data from it as well, right? So this is where we use the component injection hierarchy, right? And this is very popular. For example, say you have like a dashboard and you have major pages, and once you get to that page, only then you need specific data. And that data could be shared across multiple children within that page, right? The multiple components. And then once you move to another page, you kind of clean this all up, destroy it, and it's gone. So this is the third use case. We'll call it like a branch state. This is a very brief overview of handling the data relationship in the store. And I hope that's what the question was about. But if you think of these use cases, even 3 that I just mentioned right now, that should help you with the architecture of your app and how you think about the data. And this is actually one of the other things that I want to mention is when we typically create applications, we think about hopefully we think about the component tree structure, but we also should think about the data structure, the data flow structure, where what is used and how things flow through the tree. And that one is almost like a parallel tree of the data flows, right? Once you have that realization, and these three types of usages, it basically now start almost all of your data needs within the application start fit in the specific mental models of boxes, right? In this case. And hopefully some of my former teammates on the comments there, hopefully they can support this, because I've been talking about this forever within the company that I used to work before.
Right. Yeah, so this was pretty generic question, but yeah, the answer was really informative. I believe it really highlights the flexibility of where we can use the SignalStore. Okay, so this would be the last question. I kept it for the very end. When is NG Toronto coming?
That's a great question. The answer is it's very challenging. The economics of holding the conference in Toronto, which I've been looking for many years, even before pandemic, it's very complicated. Toronto is very expensive city, hotel wise. So it's very challenging. So hotel and venues are ridiculously expensive, but it's also a major development hub. For now, it's very hard to make the economics work, and I'm looking at this every so often, revisiting this idea. Thank you for the question.
I see. Okay, so that was the last question. I believe there are still some left in the chat, so maybe Alex, you can answer them asynchronously.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, thank you for joining us again, and I hope to see you soon at future meetups.
Yeah, thank you. See you.
Take care.